Napoli, Galatasaray and Tottenham Hotspur? This season's UEFA Champions League dark horses as teams bid to spring surprises in Europe. It is becoming harder and harder to break into the elite of the UEFA Champions League. Picking a team outside of that elite group to really go and win the whole tournament is next to impossible. But we can pick teams who will make a bit more noise than you expect and might cause an upset or two along the way. With the way modern football has been set up, it is currently an easy task to pick the top 8 favorites to make it into the automatic qualification spots of the league phase of the UEFA Champions League. You can take the 4 strongest Premier League teams of the time and the other 4 super clubs in Europe: Real Madrid, Barcelona, Paris Saint-Germain, and Bayern Munich, and they will often be the top 8 favorites for the tournament each year. Only 4 times this century has a team outside that 8 won the Champions League, albeit the 2 times Chelsea won, they did come out of nowhere. This season, we see those 4 continental clubs plus Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal and Chelsea as the bookmakers' top 8, so, realistically, we cannot say our dark horses are a list of teams who might actually win the Champions League. That is just not the way modern football has designed itself. Instead, we like to think of this as a list of teams who might surprise. Maybe they make it into the top 8, or get seeded into the playoffs, and make a shock run deep in the knockouts. Regardless, these are the teams that we think you should be keeping an eye on throughout the Champions League this season. Let's get into it. Napoli. Yes, we know in recent years Antonio Conte teams have tended to fall apart a little bit when they start having to balance European action with league football, but if any of the Italians' teams can buck that trend, it is this Napoli iteration. That is despite the injuries suffered by Romelu Lukaku that is expected to rule him out of most of the league phase. Napoli added plenty of depth this summer to the team that won the Scudetto, giving Conte some different options and crucially, the squad some much-needed experience in the shape of Champions League winner Kevin De Bruyne. Much of what Napoli will be able to do this season will come down to what Conte can extract from Lorenzo Luca and Rasmus Højlund in the absence of Lukaku. They were both highly promising young strikers whose trajectories have stalled somewhat due to various factors. Conte has a track record of getting the best out of unloved strikers, Lukaku being the case in point, so can he repeat the trick with one of these two? Early returns are encouraging with Højlund scoring against Fiorentina in his debut and generally looking sharp. Galatasaray. Last year, Galatasaray won the Turkish Super League by 11 points, and not only did they go out and re-sign Victor Osimhen when everyone thought it was impossible, but they also massively strengthened their back 4 and goalkeeper position. In addition, they added a sprinkling of top experience of Champions League winners in Leroy Sane and İlkay Gundogan. Going to Istanbul remains one of the toughest assignments in football, and with a team that is at long last worthy of their incredible fan base, it feels as if Galatasaray are set to ruffle more than a few feathers this season in the Champions League. Juventus. Are Juventus back? It might be too early to tell, but the early signs this season are extremely encouraging. They are one of just 2 Serie A teams with a 100% record, along with Napoli, after a thrilling 4-3 victory over Inter Milan on Saturday afternoon in the Derby d'Italia. Juve might not have the best squad in Italy, but what they do have is a budding superstar in Kenan Yildiz, a well-organized defensive structure, and a degree of unpredictability that can give you some fun European football. It feels like a long time since this team reached the final twice in 2 years, and the last time we saw them they were getting dumped out by PSV Eindhoven. Have things changed? Juventus have been so disappointing for so many years that it is really hard to commit to anything just yet, but they have a relatively favorable draw and they theoretically have the pieces in place. Tottenham Hotspur. There is every chance that Spurs end up making us look very silly. It would not be the first time, but despite the 1-0 loss at home to Bournemouth just before the international break, we cannot get the performance against PSG out of our heads. Spurs did some really fun stuff in the window, and they have given Thomas Frank a lot of options, and like Antonio Conte, he is a proven elevator of talent. Everyone knows this squad was better than where they finished in the Premier League last season, and it is better now than it was a year ago. Despite the loss of club icon Son Heung-min, it is also worth pointing out that, as per our friends at Opta, Spurs have the 4th lowest degree of difficulty for their fixtures in the Champions League this season. This is obviously a difficult one to predict because we have only seen these teams for a handful of games. But it is still interesting to note, and it does seem undeniable that Spurs could have had harder fixtures in their draw. Villarreal. Speaking of teams with what seems like an easier draw, let's talk about the Yellow Submarine, who sit just below Spurs in the aforementioned table. Villarreal were quietly one of the best stories in Spain last season. bulldozing their way into the Champions League by scoring 71 goals. To that attack they have added George Mikautadze to replace the Erno Berry, whilst Alberto Molero comes in to fill the void left by Alex Baena's move to Atletico Madrid. High-intensity system is either going to cause chaos for opponents or for his team. They conceded 51 goals last season, while the rest of Spain's Champions League entrants all conceded under 40. But they have made moves in that department as well. Renato Vega, Santiago Moreno and Rafa Marin have all come in to bolster the central defensive options. Villarreal won't be boring to watch. They are the highest scorers in La Liga this term, and sit 5th after 4 games. And they could do enough to make some noise. FC Porto, we wrote about Porto and the summer they have had in more depth in our article on the European winners of the transfer market, but here is the abbreviated version. Porto had a disastrous season under new CEO André Villas-Boas, yes, him, and as a result he has spent aggressively to try and get the team back to where they need to be. It is early days, but it seems to be working nicely. Porto are 4 from 4 in their start to the season, which included a 2-1 win away at last season's champions, Sporting CP. Keep an eye on 19-year-old Victor Froholt, who arrived this summer from FC Copenhagen. He is one of the most exciting talents anywhere right now, and it was a huge coup for Porto to be able to sign him. He has 3 goal involvements to start the season and is ready to announce himself on the biggest stage this season.